What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talks Rubbish, and today I'm back with another video. This time discussing my top 10 favourite Only Fools and Horses episodes. For those of you that don't know, Only Fools and Horses is an English comedy that was made from the 1980s at some point, which I can't remember, right up till 2003. It was written by John Sullivan, and it stars David Jason as the main character Del Boy, and Nicholas Lyndhurst as his brother Rodney. It centres around two market traders who essentially all Del Boy wants to do is make it big and become a millionaire. I think it's still funny to this day. You may not agree, but that's your opinion. And so we'll get started with my top 10 episodes, with number 10 being The Class of 62, which is from Series 7, and it's episode 4. In this episode, Del Boy is finally happy. He has his lovely significant other, Raquel, who I'll get into how they met in a bit. Rodney's happy, but he's living back at home because his marriage fell apart, bits like that. But I will get into that. Anyway, but everything changes in this episode when he goes to a school reunion at his local pub, and his local enemy, Roy Slater, turns back up after being put in prison for 3 years for diamond smuggling in a previous episode. But I still like how they managed to make that funny. Like, they managed to talk about their old headmaster who had a scar running down from the bridge of his nose to the corner of his mouth and a missing left ear. Right ear. And they managed to make a lot of gags about that. But also, there's a twist that I really like, which turns out that Roy Slater is actually Raquel's ex-husband. It's mentioned a few times that her ex-husband was a police officer, but it's never explicitly mentioned who that police officer was. So I really like that connection, the way they managed to connect them together. But my most favourite bit of the episode is when they're arguing, and Uncle Albert, who is an older relative that lives with Del Boy and Rodney, comes out of his bedroom, and because Raquel turns out to be her stage name and not her real name, Slater's called her Rachel, and he's just like, "Who's Rachel?" several times. Like, it's really funny. I really enjoy that. And yeah, I really enjoy how, although in the beginning it looks like Slater's changed, that it turns out that he's still a devious person, and the only reason he wanted to get back was to get Raquel to sign something, but he basically used Del Boy to do it. He used his good nature against him, basically. But yeah, I just like that episode. Number 9 is Wanted. It's from Series 3, and it's episode 6. In this episode, Rodney basically is on a night out, and on his way home, he's accused by a local crazy person, essentially. I'm not too sure how to word it. Of indecently assaulting her. But rather than being the compassionate brother and telling him, "Oh no, you've just bumped into Blossom," and not to worry, Del Boy basically takes the mick out of him, completely winding him up, telling him he'll go to prison for this, blah blah blah, and that makes me laugh every time. And that just makes me laugh, really. It shouldn't be funny, but with David Jason's delivery, it is funny, if that makes sense. And he basically impersonates a judge, I think it is, and he's like, "The case of the Pekka pounds are," and that makes me laugh every time. His reaction when Rodney goes into his room to Grandad, who's another elderly relative who lived with Del Boy and Rodney before he passed away. I'll get into that in a bit. That just makes me laugh. And Grandad just telling him, "A joke's a joke, but don't take it too far." Obviously, Del Boy takes it too far. And then, because Rodney runs away, the only reason they find out where he is because he smokes weed, and it's drifting through the air ducts of their flats, and he's hiding in like the boiler room basically, and that their reconciliation still makes me cry to this day, and I really enjoyed that episode. Number 8, speaking of Grandad, is Strained Relations, which is from Series 4 and it's episode 2. In this episode, Grandad, the actor that played Grandad, Leonard Pierce, unfortunately passed away during the making of Season 4. So John Sullivan decided to incorporate his death into the script and have Grandad pass away. So, and I really enjoy the emotion that that is conveyed in this episode by Delboy and Rodney. You can tell that in some ways David Jason and Nicholas Lyndhurst aren't acting. It is just like real pure emotion that they feel for their fallen colleague and friend. So I really like that. But the main thing I really like is this introduces us to the older relative I spoke about earlier, Uncle Albert. Basically, he is an old sea dog, and because he's lonely or something, he basically ends up staying with relatives as long as they can. Eventually, he can. But but eventually, they just get sick of him. Like, for example, he tells a story in this episode that makes me laugh, where a relative sent him to get groceries, but when he came back, they'd emigrated. That makes me laugh. He tells a story about where he went to stay with a relative, but 6 months later, they set fire to the house. That makes me laugh. And just Delboy and Rodney's reaction when they look at each other like, what are we going to do here? Delboy, the main reason I like this episode is the way Delboy just breaks down to Rodney and is like, because basically at Grandad's funeral, Delboy is basically smiling, he's drinking, and Rodney tells him the next day, how could you get over it so easily? And then Delboy basically breaks down and says, get over it. I haven't even started to get over it yet, but I've always had to play the tough guy since Mum died and Dad left. But he just doesn't, he's played it for so long now, he doesn't know how to stop. And he tells him, because he kicks Uncle Albert out, the main reason he doesn't want him to stay is because relatives always leave him and it breaks his heart. So, whether they die or whether they leave. So, I really enjoy that aspect. I find that really cool. But the main reason I like this episode is because he sends him down the scene like I think that's like an old people's home, I think. And he says to him that they find him in the pub and they didn't have any beds, he claims. But the main reason I like this is the ending, where he tells him Delboy tells Albert to come stay, blah, 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 blah. And the owner of the pub just goes, I've just phoned the mission as they're leaving, and he's got a bed for you. And Albert's like, shh. That makes me die every time. Like, yeah, I just feel like that was a fitting tribute to Leonard Pierce, who played Grandad, but it also moved the show forward, so I found that very cool. Number 7 is Tea for Free. This is season 5, and I think it might have been the Christmas special, I'm not too sure, but it's episode 3. In this episode, a former childhood sweetheart of the boys shows up, and they basically are in competition to find out who's going to date her. Turns out she's engaged in the end, but I'll get to that. And I really like that, but I really like also in this episode how Albert tells Rodney that him and Grandad, who passed away in the episode I talked about previously, were as inseparable as Delboy and Rodney are, until Ada, who would later become Albert's wife, came between them, and he doesn't want to see that happen with Delboy and Rodney. And I really enjoy that. I really enjoy like just the way that the boys are competing. Delboy's getting a nice dinner, Rodney's just being overly nice. But the main reason I love this episode is the hang gliding moment. Basically, because the boys are competing so much, Delboy tells this girl that he used to be like a stunt man, blah, blah, blah. So she basically arranges for him to go up on a hang glider. And he becomes, basically, him and Rodney hatch a plan to get him out of it. But Rodney negates on it as sort of revenge for everything he's done to him. Because I didn't mention that they have a tanning machine in their house, and Delboy sets it up to be super high as Rodney falls asleep. So he basically wakes up burnt, and as revenge, that's why he sets him up on the hang glider. I love that, but I also love at the end of the episode, Delboy comes back in a wheelchair. He's not really injured, but he basically plays it until Rodney says something, and he's like, "You," and he stands up, and he's like, "I must be getting some feeling back." Blah 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 blah. And then right at the end, as they're talking about arguing over Lisa, her uncle basically turns up and is like, "You know she's engaged, right?" And I enjoy that. And yeah, I just think that's a really good gag to end the episode on. And Albert just being like, "She was engaged all the time," just makes me laugh. So, number 6 is Sleepless in Peckham. This was the Christmas special they did in 2003. Do I agree with them making more episodes after their happy ending in one of them? No. But I feel like this, if they weren't going to end it with a certain episode I'll get to in a little while, was another very good ending. Cassandra, who is Rodney's wife, they reconciled after their previous differences, is now pregnant and due to give birth. And I really like how basically they've lost a load of money. The Trotters are about to lose their house if they don't get some money quickly. But because Albert, who the actor that plays him, passed away some years before this episode was made, his death was written in again. They basically find out that Albert invested a gift they gave him in a more stable area and left his remaining money to them, so they're saved. And I really like the way it just ends happily. For me, everyone calling for another episode, yes, I'd love to see another episode, but this was the perfect ending. It ended happily with the boys still market trading. Rodney's got his kid, Delboy's got his kid, they're all happy, and it's just the perfect ending for me. Number 5 is that episode I spoke about they should have ended on, Time on Our Hands. This was the Christmas special, 1996. I love this episode because, again, Delboy finally achieves his dream. He becomes a millionaire because it turns out that he's had an invaluable watch in his possession since essentially day one of the series. And Raquel's father comes to visit and he finds the watch, and it is found, and they find out that it's worth a load of money, and they win. That's the wrong word. It is bought for 6.2 million. So Delboy gets his Rolls Royce he's always wanted. Albert gets a boat, and it just ends happily. And for me, they should have ended it here with them all happy with their money and everything, and it would have just been nice to have seen them happy. Like, the end goal of the series was for Delboy to become a millionaire. He became a millionaire, and I just love that, really. Alright, number 4 is Healthy Competition. This is Series 3, Episode 2. In this episode, Rodney basically becomes sick of being Delboy's lookout and errand boy and decides to become a market trader on his own with his best mate Mickey Pierce. And I really like when Delboy and Rodney are in competition with each other. And in this one, they're in competition because, trying to be the best trader. And even though Delboy warns him not to buy something at an auction, Rodney does so because he thinks his brother's just trying to get one up on him. And I still like that brotherly connection there, which I really enjoy. And they basically are in competition with each other throughout the entire episode, right up until the end when Delboy convinces their mate to buy them engines, so Rodney will be his partner again because Mickey Pierce has basically taken all his money and run away. So I really enjoy how at the end, Delboy basically says, let's go back as we were, just you and me. And they do that. But the main reason I love this episode is a scene where Rodney is talking with Grandad and Delboy, and they're talking about how Rodney's business is going, and Grandad turns around and goes, because he's saying about starting a company in a small way, and Grandad turns around and goes, what have you got, a Wendy house? And I don't know whether this was real, I don't know whether David Jason was acting, but his reaction to that line just kills me every time. It just makes me laugh so much. Number 3 is Yuppie Love. This is where Rodney first meets Cassandra at an evening school, but the reason I love this episode has nothing to do with that. This is the episode with the iconic Delboy falling for a bar scene. If you've seen this episode, you know what I'm talking. If you've seen this series, you know what I'm talking about. It's where he's at a wine bar, he's leaning on the bar trying to be all cool. He leans off it for 1 second. The barman lifts up the hatch of the bar that he's leaning on. He goes to lean again, and he falls straight through it. And just triggers reaction, who is one of Delboy's friends, who's a bit dopey, and he's just sort of looking around for Delboy, being like, where are you? That makes me die every time. And yeah, it just makes me laugh every time. If you haven't seen the show, you have 100% seen the Fall Through the Bar episode. Scene. Number 2 is Big Brother. This was Series 1, Episode 1. I really like this episode, how it establishes the characters. It really helps to figure out who they all are, what their dreams are, the fact that Delboy and Rodney always have differences as partners because they buy some briefcases and Rodney tells him to have nothing to do with them. So Rodney runs away because he thinks Delboy doesn't trust him. And yeah, but I really like how in the end they reconcile, and at the end of the day, Delboy will always be Rodney's big brother. And number 1, my favourite episode, again, this isn't my favourite running gags, this is just my favourite episode, is the Jolly Boys outing, which is the Christmas special 1989. In this episode, the boys basically go on an outing with all their mates to Margate and get in trouble and see what kind of trouble they can get into. And I really enjoy how they are forced to spend the night because their coach blows up. Yes, if you haven't seen the series, watch this episode just for that. And this is where Del finally reconciles with Raquel. He went on a date with her, didn't work out for reasons, and you find he got into that she's now performing in Margate, and this is where they reconcile. And yeah, that's just my favourite episode overall, guys. Let me know yours in the comments below. Please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!